Wonderful. Welcome everybody to the Transforming Autism Project webinar. Tonight we are going to talk about foundations of communication. My name is Kendall Cygan and I'm here with Andrew and Zuzana. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, yeah, I'll introduce myself. Good evening here in London. My name is Zuzana Camm and I'm a child psychotherapist and I work with children and parents. And a lot of children I work with have autism, and I'm very happy to be here tonight and I'm looking forward to this shared space.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lily.
Everybody. Oh.
Yeah, sometimes it's tricky. It's playing. It's like playing tag with technology.
Hello, my name.
If can you guys hear me okay on your end?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So my name is Andrew Shahan. I am an autism and child development specialist here in the USA in California, and I'm excited to be here to talk with all of you about supporting your child's communication.
Wonderful. So with that, just a couple of house rules. If you, as the participants, if you could please mute your mic and turn your webcam off. As Andrew, Zuzana, and I go through this PowerPoint, we will be sharing our thoughts together collectively. And once it's finished in about 15 or 20 minutes after we're done, we will then open the floor up for questions where we will remind you to turn your mic on. But please feel free to turn your webcam on, engage with us, ask us questions. We also have questions that were sent in just in case they are not here live. So we will get started. Save your questions for the end, and we hope you enjoy our presentation today on communication, which is one of my favorite topics. So we will get started. So a quick overview, and Andrew and Zuzana, please feel free to butt in whenever. Behavior is communication. So any behavior you see, whether it's vocal or non-vocal, any gestures you see, all of that is your child trying to communicate with you. So keep that in mind, because communication is a lot more than just what we think as talking. And when we go through this, we're going to go through it from a perspective of the steps of wanting to really process what's happening around us. So listening and reflecting back what's happening, really paying close attention to the context, to the gestures or the signals that maybe your child is giving if they're not necessarily talking just yet. So just keep that in mind, that behavior that you see is them communicating with you. Before we move on to the next slide, Andrew or Zuzana, anything you want to put in before we get rolling?
Zuzana?
Shall I go first?
Yes.
I'm just thinking about feelings because this is the area where I work. And I also want to say that feelings are also a way to communicate. So sometimes the children can't tell us, or the behavior might be confusing or puzzling us. But if we attend to what we feel, we might be able to get a clue about our child's communication. So our inner feelings and responses to our child's behavior also may inform us and help us communicate.
Beautiful.
I'll just say a quick few things about communication. So I would say that in all of my years of work with children with autism and families, no area of development seems to sometimes challenge parents more than communication. So most parents, when I ask them, what do you most want, or what's your number one priority for your child, most families say, I just want him to talk. I want him to communicate with me. I want him to tell me what he's thinking or feeling or what he wants or what he needs. So we really recognize that this area is incredibly not only crucial for all of you as families, but it's also one that I think we really understand a lot more about now than we did many years ago, about how to really support communication for our children that have autism. And so we want to try to give you some just a bit of information in a short amount of time, and then really hear some of your questions. And just to also emphasize what Kendall said right at the beginning, which is that communication is so much more than words. And in the field, oftentimes we tend to focus a bit too much on language and on words. And what I've learned over the years also is that even our children with autism that develop language and develop words and can talk a lot, they still really struggle with what we call nonverbal communication, right? Meaning being able to convey a message to another person, like I'm doing right now, with my hand, with gestures, with my facial expressions, with eye contact. I'm communicating a lot to all of you that's not just about the words that I'm saying. And oftentimes this can be much harder to develop for children with autism especially. So we're really going to emphasize that today, how important all of that is, not to just focus on the words themselves, but everything with communication.
Thank you both, Andrew and Zuzana. So this is something that you might have seen before, but I feel like we keep coming back to this quote, but it is such an important quote. There is such a way in how we respond to things, and this also touches upon what Zuzana said about the feelings that you have inside of you. There's a way in our own nonverbals and in our own gestures that our children can pick up on. And I absolutely love this quote. But so this is just something to really set the mood for tonight as we go into the foundations of communication. So this slide, I'm going to let Zuzana speak about this slide. This is more of her wheelhouse. So Zuzana, would you like to explain how you need to explore your child's profile?
Yes. So when I meet a child, every time I meet the child and the parents, I need to think about who the child is, how the child functions in the world, what is very specific for the child's way of processing information about the world and in relationships. So I'm thinking, what is the child's profile? How does the kid use senses to communicate with their environment and others? So I need to think about the child's sensitivities and strengths as well, because the strengths will help me or inform me what tools, for example, for communication I can use. So I'll follow the strengths and I'll nourish and pamper the difficulties. And for this is a really good idea to cooperate or think about sensory integration. And a good professional or field to help us with the profile is occupational therapy and sensory integration. There might be other fields and other professionals, but this is something that comes to me first. So sensory integration. I'm trying to shrink things because we don't have that much time. And one thing to always keep in mind is that autistic children and people have different wiring, and it's usually the case that we need to be slower and wait a bit more to help them process what comes at them. Imagine that they have more connections and the things go a bit further, maybe around the head before they get or snap. So it's good to help them process everything that comes to them and wait and watch and wonder and give them the time to respond to us. Anything
Beautiful.
else, Kendall and Andrew?
No, I'm glad I let you talk about that slide. You did it perfectly. Andrew, anything from you?
No, I think that's Zuzana, what you said about how kids on the spectrum, their brains are wired in such a way that being able to communicate and interact with people can be much more challenging. So this is so in many ways, some of what is extra challenging for you as parents that have a child with autism is that sometimes you're doing everything just exactly right that you would need to do to help a typical child with a typical brain learn to communicate with you. The challenge is that you have a child who has a slightly different brain. And so in some ways, what we're talking about here is helping you provide some extra special support for your child who needs, like Zuzana said, needs you to slow down a bit more or wait a longer period of time for them to process or try to understand what you've just said. And some of that can be incredibly challenging for you as parents. And I think it's important to recognize that this is not about you, and in many cases you're doing everything in just the right way to help your child communicate. It's just that your child needs some extra special support.
And not only, sorry, go ahead, Zuzana.
You go first and then I'll step into.
No, you go, because I'm gonna bridge into interaction, so you can talk first.
Yes, I wanted to add to what Andrew was saying, that we explore the child's profile and how they function, but we also need to take into consideration how we function and the difficulties that we are somewhere a bit different. So the waiting and longer time will allow us to notice and to think and reflect, because we are working a bit differently internally. But there are two different profiles, so we need to understand ourselves as well and how we communicate.
And moving into just overall interaction, because as we said in the beginning, behavior being communication, how we interact and how your child interacts is their way of communicating. And I often find when I'm in the field, a lot of parents will tell me things like, I want him to go on a swing, or I want him to play functionally, the big word, play functionally with other peers. And then they'll tell me, yeah, he only likes to play with dinosaurs. And I'll sit there and I'll think and I'll respond and I'll say, well, start with the dinosaurs. If they have something that they love and that they're playing with, go with that, follow them, and allow them, give them opportunities to communicate with you through this play. A lot of the times, parents will want their child to play something that's age appropriate, or to color, or to write, or do something that is so-called age appropriate. But with exploring the profile, take a step back and give the space where you can say, hey, my child loves to play with dinosaurs. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Use that to your advantage. Use that to engage with them. Use that to promote that interaction. Help them understand things like symbolic play when you're playing with the dinosaurs. Imitate them. There's so much you can explore through your child's interest, and it goes back to that foundation of exploring their profile. And before I move forward to the next slide, Andrew, do you have anything else about the interactions?
Yes, of course. Just to build on what you just said, Kendall, I think, what's true for children with autism, by the way, is also true for all of us. All of us communicate most about the things that we're most interested in and passionate about and excited about, right? So when we get together with someone who gives us the message, I hear you, I'm interested in what you're saying, I see you really love to play with your dinosaurs, all of a sudden, our motivation to communicate greatly increases. And this is a very, very simple idea, but can be challenging to remember when our kids seem to not be interested in playing with us. And so the idea is when your child is super interested in something and you're able to follow their interests and follow what they're most focused on and excited about, oftentimes the communication opportunity is much bigger. And so really think about learning more about what your child is most interested in and motivated by, because that's going to make it much easier for you to create opportunities for communication.
And I think this also reiterates things that both you and Zuzana were saying, that the connection is so important in this social interaction, and by making it predictable for them, by slowing down, giving pauses, repeating things, it really helps the child engage more in your play. And this connection is so important for communication. If you think about it, every day when we go through life, if we're communicating with somebody and we don't have that connection, we might start to veer away from them or think, hey, I'm not going to talk to them today, or I don't feel like talking to them today, because you don't have that connection. So when you build that, going backwards, if you know your child's profile, you can then build on your social engagement with them and build that connection based on their interests and their motivation. And with that connection starts to become a greater increase in communication. And Zuzana, did you have anything else on this slide?
This is such a beautiful topic, and we can talk about it for hours. But
Yes.
I just want to say one thing. When we connect with our children through play, and when we follow their ideas and their interests, it actually feels very beautiful. It's enjoyable for both of us. So it's just something to think about. I mean, often parents ask me, how do I do it right? And I always say, do you enjoy it? Yeah? Is your kid enjoying it? Yeah? You're doing it right. So just to sum up.
Absolutely, yeah. Very important.
Yeah.
Can I use a couple of examples from that slide to make it a little bit more clear? So bear with me, because I'm not a professional singer, but I was going to use an example. If your child, for example, likes songs, sometimes what can happen is if I notice that my child likes the song Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, I might sing Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes and notice that my child's looking at me and smiling and is really excited. And then I'll sing Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes like 3 or 4 times, which is a fantastic starting point. But what can even enhance the interaction and then create more communication opportunities is if I start singing. Did I say Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes? Or if you're happy and you know it, which one did I say?
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Okay, so I don't know which is popular in the UK, but if I say head, shoulders, knees, and toes, head, and then I just pause and freeze in the middle of the song, all of a sudden my child is going to have an opportunity to look at me and say, ah, Andrew, keep singing that song. I love that song. If I keep singing the song, my child might love it, but they actually are not having an opportunity to let me know more clearly, keep going, I love that. And so the same is true also with like even a tickle game. If I'm about to tickle my child, here comes a tickle, and I tickle a little bit and then I pull back and I just pause and freeze, then my child has an opportunity to say, oh, I like that, I want you to keep tickling me. So then they're going to reach towards me, grab my hands, maybe they're going to say tickle or anything along those lines. So these little moments of games and interactions that you've already established with your kids, just think about adding a pause or more pauses into those activities to allow your child the opportunity to communicate more clearly with you that they want something to continue.
And then giving them that immediate response of when they interject or when they join you, then giving that immediate response of tickling them or continuing the song.
Yes.
I'm thinking about another example, if I can. I know we are running out of time. I was thinking about a child who can't request yet. And it might be very hard perhaps to connect with the child because they might withdraw, do repetitive movements, look away. Once I worked with a child who did that, and it was really, I felt like, is she taking me in at all? And then she made sounds, and then I just repeated that, just tried if anything's going to happen, and she did again, and then we took turns, and it was like a song, non-verbal. There was no requesting, but I had a strong sense of we are together. And then slowly I tried to do something. Maybe is she going to accept if I bring a shaker and just tap it? And then there is again the dance of feeling the child, watching the child. How does she respond to me? Is it too much what I'm doing? Am I taking her away from what she is trying to tell me with the sounds? So that's an example of work with someone who's difficult to reach, but there is a way, there is a strength to follow. Yeah.
And what an important message it shows them when you connect with them and when you engage with them. It's powerful, because then you see that their response is positive and they like what you're doing and they want to engage with you. It's very powerful.
Yes, and Zuzana and Kendall, that's exactly what on this slide, exactly what you're creating with the child, right? So your example, Zuzana, is you gave the child the message, I'm with you, right? You're not just making sounds by yourself, right? So all of a sudden, a child starts to maybe take you in a little bit more. They start to become a little bit more, someone hears me. Someone's with me. And this can be a very powerful starting point, especially if your child tends to be much more sometimes disconnected or seems to prefer playing or being by themselves a lot. So yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that because it's on this slide. And also we talk, I think, on a later slide about really noticing and repeating how important that is to repeat what your child, the sounds your child makes, or even what they say to you, as a way to say to them, I heard you, I'm with you. Your words and your language and your sounds are powerful. And that can be a very important starting point for our kids' communication.
And not only that, but also touching upon what Zuzana said in the beginning, it's also important to take into consideration where your own profile is, where your own feelings are, and where your thoughts are and what your thoughts are. And make sure that you're allowing yourself to be open and giving yourself time to connect with your child. So that will involve being alert, noticing what they're doing, especially those gestures and those nonverbals, keeping an eye if there's something they're doing, like in that head, shoulders, knees, and toes, really watching for the slightest gesture or them about to say something so that you can react and have that connection and be ready for that moment. And Zuzana, I'll let you finish this slide because I know that you have some really powerful things to say here.
I just want to say one thing from my experience, that often the children, when they start to request and they're still nonverbal, their gestures might be very subtle. So we might just miss them, and it's a great shame if that happens. So it might be helpful perhaps even to record when we play, interact and watch it back, because we might notice, oh, he did this actually, and I didn't notice. And he said, look there, mommy. So it's good to really take the time and slow down for us to notice the very subtle, and it can be richly micro expression, what this, if it comes from them, from their inner motivation, it's so powerful. And if we pick it, this is the way in. That's the green ticket and the fast train ticket to communicating and giving them the feedback. I hear you. So.
I've had a lot of success with video recording sessions, and I had a child who had that little micro subtleness in his face, and we were singing a song together, and I stopped singing, and I was like, okay, Kendall, this is the 12th time you've sung this song this session. Let's throw in the towel and let's move on to a different activity. And once I stopped, I didn't notice it in the session. I wish I did. But when I played back the video, after I stopped singing that 12th time, I noticed in the video his eyes turn and his eyes kind of just go that way. And I looked at it in the video and I was just like, oh my goodness, I need to pay attention to not only his sounds, but also small body movements that are happening in his face, because he was looking towards me, and who knows what that was meaning, but it was something that I missed because I wasn't really present and focusing on what was happening. I was too busy with, okay, what can I do next in the session to connect with him, instead of maybe he's already trying to connect with me and I missed that. So recording it really helped.
Yes, one thing just to reiterate what you guys have said, that I work, of course, over the years with a lot of educators, with a lot of school teams. I'm a special educator, so an issue that always comes to me from school teams is he or she is not communicating. We don't know how to get him or her to communicate. And I will always say that over the last 30 years, although I didn't notice always, just like you're both saying, I have never met a child with autism that was not communicating. It's just that I wasn't paying close enough attention, and I was looking for clearer signs of communication. I was looking for a sound or a word or something verbal, or I was looking for a much clearer gesture. But through video, oftentimes, I've learned to really notice the much more subtle communication attempts. So try to keep that in mind, parents, that your child is always communicating with you, and sometimes it can just be really hard to read. So that's, I think, one of the greatest challenges, is to really tune into and recognize and then quickly respond to those really subtle communications if your child isn't communicating in a bigger way. But the signs are there, and I guarantee your child is trying to communicate with you.
And I think also a lot of what you just said, Andrew, transfers into this slide of just really being present when you're playing with your child and observing them, waiting for them to do something, following them, labeling it, imitating them, celebrating when things happen. Zuzana, you mentioned the celebration part, and I absolutely love that. Celebrating when moments like the head, shoulders, knees, and toes, when that happens, really making that a big moment, really connecting with them. Like you said, Andrew, with the tickles, really the moments that you can celebrate with your child, that is such powerful engagement and positive flowing between both of you. It's really beautiful when you see that happen.
Beautiful. How are we doing on time?
We're almost there.
Okay, good.
So one tip that I like to use in the field is always use visuals. Whether it's nonverbal or verbal communication, gestures are so important, especially to your children when you're trying to communicate with them or when they're communicating with you. And also very important, the last slide said it as well, really simplify and be simple in your gesture and use everything when you're communicating. It's not just about what I'm saying, but also what my face looks like, what my eyes look like, how's my body language, am I tight, am I open? Really important, and big takeaways of being aware of your child's profile. And Zuzana, I'll let you finish this a little bit, but that tip of being aware of what helps your child process your communication by exploring their profile. You know your child best and how to best communicate with them. Zuzana, do you have anything else to add for that?
I just have an example of how different it can be. I have just recently worked with a very sensitive child, and I just met her for the first time, and I played a song on a guitar, and it was quite slow, and she came to the guitar and played it, and then I thought, she likes jumping, I'll do something fast, and I just speed it up a bit, and she was not with me. She walked away. And I just said, what was that? Was it my speed? Was it louder song? Was it fast? So it's just an example that sometimes just the pace of how we speak may be not in tune with what your child needs right now. Or it can be the pitch or the intonation. Maybe we are too high. Maybe we need to ground ourselves a little bit and slow down. Or some children may be very sensitive to how close we are next to them, so we might need to be further away to help them feel safe, or contrary, they might need a bit of postural support or maybe hug, so, and it can differ every moment. So we always need to think in the here and now. We always need to reflect about how we are feeling in the present moment. I can speak for myself. I need to reflect, what am I feeling right now? Am I stressed from somewhere else? How present can I be? Am I trying to be too eager to be close to the child? Maybe I'm creating more anxiety in the child. So now I'm quite fast as well. I'll slow down, reflect on what's happening in me, what's happening in the child, and what helps us be in contact and connection.
And this is another tip, something that we've covered throughout the PowerPoint. Constantly just be aware as the parent in your own self, not trying to force any agenda or put any pressure on them in the communication aspect. Their communication is already developing, and like Andrew said, and I personally agree with it, I've never met someone with autism who hasn't tried to communicate in their own way. So keeping an eye on you, being alert as the parent for acknowledging what they're interested in, and keeping an eye so that you can recognize and be present in the here and now of what are they interested in that maybe I'm missing, or maybe that I'm not seeing clearly. So just try and be aware as a parent. It's not about what you're focused on, but what your child is focused on. And the last slide is a debate that the three of us have gotten into, and it's a big thing that we can spend hours on, but the important takeaway that actually, Andrew, would you like to take over this slide?
Of course. So this is, I think this can be quite, many people in the field, many professionals have very different opinions about this. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that any group of professionals that is coming to the table to talk about supporting families or supporting communication may have different perspectives about what helps the most. And I will say that what I've learned over the years is that I started in the field years ago, and I did what I thought was going to be helpful to try to get responses from the kids I was working with, which is that I asked a lot of questions. When as adults, when we're not getting responses from kids, oftentimes our tendency is to actually then ask more questions. Do you like it? How many do you have? What color is it? What's your favorite one? Like, so I used to ask tons of questions when I would be interacting with kids. And as I learned more about communication and social interaction over the years, what I started realizing is that I was actually sometimes pushing or pressuring kids to respond to me. And sometimes they would respond to me by answering my question, but then it was, I would ask a question, get a response, interaction over. And what I learned, and this was a lot through video of my own interactions with kids and my own training, I started doing things like just making a statement. So I would name something that the child was interested in, or I would name something that I was doing, and then I would pause. And what I started noticing was that the kids would actually then come towards me and want to interact with me and want to engage with me and play with me much more often and for much longer periods of time when I wasn't asking them questions. And so I think actually the research is all over the place about this. But I think what I would recommend is if you're going to ask your child questions, also balance that with making statements, right? So if you notice that your tendency is to ask your child questions as a way to get responses, experiment with statements, right? Instead of saying, you know, do do you like your teddy bear? You can say, ah, you have your teddy bear, and see what happens. So that's my perspective, at least for today, on the question. Yes.
And Zuzana, you also had a good point about this slide, and it connects to how every child is different. That first foundation slide we covered of every child needing to know what their profile is. Do you want to also add your thoughts?
I would perhaps just say in very simple way that every child will be developmentally different as well. So they'll have different set of communication skills. So we might use questions with children who might be verbal or can think with us, can problem solve with us. But if the child is at the very beginning of communicating, perhaps non-verbally or perhaps a few words, then the questions can wait for later when they have more sense of self and good ability to problem solve. Then they can be happy to answer or do something you are working on together.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for putting that piece in for both of you. And with that, a little bit over on time, but we come to our conclusion. So thank you for listening to the three of us. Any parents, if you would like to unmute yourselves and turn your mic on, optional, please feel free. We have opened the floor up for you to ask any questions. And also, Andrew and Zuzana, I cannot see the chat box, so if one of you can just make sure that nothing is on there.
I have the chat box open and no questions have come up yet.
Zuzana, do you maybe want to ask one of the questions that are on the sheet that were sent in? Oh, I think I might hear actually a microphone.
Yeah, mine's on. I'm trying to go ahead, Susanna, and do one of the questions. I'll just get myself organised.
Zuzana, do you have that question list up that you're able to read off a question?
No.
Can you please ask the question, and I'll find the questions that I've written down meanwhile. Is it okay?
Yeah, I'm still trying to just get my questions together.
Take your time. There's no hurry.
I had them.
Yeah.
I had them up. Oh, here's a question. What do you recommend when a child is scripting? And I feel like this is a good opportunity for communication. Great question. Can you still see my screen? Okay, actually.
No.
Yeah, go ahead, Kendall.
Sorry, I'm trying to turn my video off because it's time the presentation is over. Can you see me or no?
Yes, I can see you now.
Okay, great. Sorry, because I can't see myself, so I'm not sure. So great question. I personally think scripting is a great opportunity for communication. For starters, scripting is more than likely something that they're interested in, and they're probably scripting a TV show or a movie that they like to watch. So scripting is a really good opportunity for you to imitate, observe, comment on, maybe ask a few questions here and there, and give your comments, as Andrew said, of, oh, you really like that movie, or oh, you really like that show, because they're communicating to you in the way that they know how, which is scripting, from how I know scripting. Andrew and Zuzana, do you have any other thoughts of scripting?
Absolutely. I think scripting is one of those areas that I think in many ways the professional community again can have very different and very strong opinions about. My perspective on scripting, and I think about this especially through the lens of child development, is that all typical children actually go through a phase in their language development where they're doing a lot of scripting. So they're memorizing a phrase or some terms from either sometimes a TV show, or it could be something that they've heard, and they will say that particular wording or phrase sometimes over and over again in a situation. And what is important to understand is that sometimes they're very much trying to communicate something to you, but they're just not able to find the right words. And so they can get stuck in repeating a certain phrase over and over again as a way to try to get a message across to you. It's just that they don't have the right words to capture what they're actually thinking or feeling in the moment. So they just play literally almost a tape in their heads of something that they've heard over and over again. I would also say that scripting sometimes is a moment where a child is actually just playing a movie in their heads, sometimes to occupy themselves or soothe themselves or even entertain themselves. So
Right.
sometimes I've worked with plenty of kids where I've tried to respond to their scripting, and sometimes the child quickly moves away from me or turns away as a way to let me know, you know what, I'm actually not trying to interact with you right now. I'm just actually really busy in my own head trying to cope with a challenging situation. So I'm just going to kind of talk to myself. So scripting can mean that as well. So I think it really depends on your child, and also it's important to not just respond in one set way to their scripting. It's okay to really try different responses and see what works to actually get more interaction and communication going with them.
So if you've got a child who uses that effectively as a coping mechanism, really, in that sense, would it be sensible then to encourage that child to learn more scripts, as it were? Would that be something that you would kind of push towards, or would encourage quite as a tool?
I would say, depending on the situation, depending on the child, sometimes absolutely, because if your child is really good at memorizing phrases, and we know some of our kids can have really good sort of rote memory, so memorizing phrases, of course, can be helpful. The challenge is for your child is, how do we help them use language in a way that helps them be more successful communicating with the world around them? So sometimes if your child is going to a script as a way to say, mommy, I need a break, or mommy, I'm stressed out right now, it might be really helpful to help them use a phrase that everyone is going to more clearly understand, right? So I would always think about scripts that are also have more clear communication potential than just like a scene from a movie. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and that's the challenge, is to try to understand in a certain situation. If your child is scripting, he might be telling you, I need a break right now, I'm really tired, I just got home from school, leave me alone. And so we want to always help that child find more appropriate language. Does that make sense? That's clearer?
To make that scripting more functional in a sense.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And that brings me to another question that I think, Zuzana, you might have a great time answering. There's a question that was submitted that says, I'd like to know how to effectively communicate with my 7-year-old son when he's in a high state of anger. What can I say to get him back into a calmer zone? Because when he's angry, he shouts and runs off, and listening seems to disappear.
I just want a practical question, ask a practical question. Are we seeing each other or not? Can we see each other?
Yeah, just the three. I haven't turned my webcam on because
No, I'm just.
I think everybody can see the three of us.
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
That's what oh, brilliant. Thank you. I lost that because I've got the questions. Brilliant. Thank you. I feel more contained now when I see you. Yes. So When we get to a state of high arousal, if I say this way, if we are very angry or frightened or anxious or raging, it's very hard to take anything else in because we are flooded with big feelings. And there is I really like this model, Dan Siegel's model of a brain. If you imagine a brain, this is area of feelings, emotions, area of bodily functions, and area of thinking, language. If this middle part of the brain is flooded with activity and big emotions and with energy and fire, imagine fire, there's not enough at the top of the brain, so the language is not really on hand or not easily accessible. So we need to use other tools to help the child calm down. And I would go back to what we've been talking about throughout our session today, and it's just to let the child know, I'm here with you, we are in this together, I see you're angry, work with your own sense of feeling grounded and manage the very difficult, emotionally difficult situation, and help the child being safe in processing the anger. And it's very good to talk about the situation when you feel connected and calm, both of you. So the best thing is you, let's say in the end of the day, you feel like, oh, you're having lovely time sharing a little activity, I don't know, maybe washing up, I don't know what it is, whatever that you feel, we are connected now. You can go back to that situation at the child's level and just reflect on it and explain what happened before, what happened in the heat, and how you can manage after. And in this way, you can then help the child regulate or manage the situation or similar situation better next time. And it might be really tiny steps, or you can help perhaps regulate by a few seconds better next time, but it takes time to practice, to notice, also to be aware of what happened, what triggers the big anger, what's the cause of it. So you want to perhaps prevent it before it happens or escalates, because we can think about frequency of the emotional meltdowns or meltdowns, tantrums, whatever it is, the frequency and intensity. So there are two things we want to think about in ourselves, and then at the child's level with the child. Is there anything you'd like to add to this? It was just
no, just thinking about, something like, like Lou, just a tangible example, like if you Lou's Fred the donkey, right? The first time it was total panic, but then when he's lost it again, it's like, well, it's in the house because we know it was there before we went out, so again, it's that reducing, just to try and reduce the intensity, really, isn't it, of what the reaction when he's lost Fred the donkey.
And in that moment, it doesn't really help. You rationalizing. It's here. It's not. The brain's not ready to.
It's long gone.
It's unreasonable. It's overflowing emotion. Just stay. Oh, I see and meet. I see you're really angry. Where's the donkey? Oh, you really miss it. You're actually very scared where it is. Maybe just reflect the feelings. Be there with the big. And then later, oh, that was really hard where you didn't know when the donkey is. You loved your donkey.
It's the reflection. There's a lot of reflecting on it to consolidate that learning, isn't it? That's the And
perhaps thinking about a solution. Is there a way to perhaps donkey safe?
Fine.
It's a question, but thinking, it was so difficult when you lost it. That's a state.
Not a lot, really. In my house, why?
I know. Like having a stable for Fred the donkey to live in, so that he's there.
Oh, don't know yet.
Sorry, was there a question that we missed in there that one of you was asking?
We have We have a few microphones on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one quick question. If you were
Mhm.
talking about feelings at the beginning, but what happens if they can't express their feelings?
What do you mean by they can't express their feelings?
When we were talking, we were talking earlier. You were saying that you were actually doing about the feelings. When we came up with the list at the beginning, what do we call it? Was talking about the feelings.
Mhm.
If they can't express their feelings, how do you deal with that in the communication line?
I think maybe Kendall, were you asking what does that look like? Like how is your child? You said they're not able to express their feelings. Is there
Right.
any way that the feelings come out in
Maybe
your
it's
child's
different.
actions or facial expressions or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of on about, because they can't express what they're going through. And if you've got that problem, right, how do you deal with that? Because you're saying that you should take into account their feelings.
But if they don't know their feelings, then there's nothing to take into account. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very, very big task and complex task to communicate feelings. Because first of all, we need to be aware of them. Second, we need to be able to communicate. And before we even do that, we need to feel like we are safe to communicate the feelings. So there is a lot that the child needs, or whoever, an adult, and it doesn't have to be autistic. It applies to everyone.
Come on now, pick up the phone, Dad.
Could you please say it again?
Oh, sorry. I understand what you mean.
You don't?
No, I do. I understand what you actually mean about the feelings, that people have different feelings for different situations.
That's right. And it can be very challenging to express the feelings. So sometimes the children can behave in a way that can inform us about the feelings. So the first step for the children, how they learn about their feelings, is if the parent or the adult reflects them back to them. And imagine a little baby. The baby cries. What we do? Oh, you are sad, or you're very upset now. Oh, let me take care of you. So we tell them how they feel. They don't know. They can't tell us, but we feel moved by that cry, or by the screams, or by laughter. It can be nice too. It can be pleasant. So if a baby giggles, like the tickles, so we give them back. We give the feeling back to them. We make a meaning. We give it words. So this is the way how we can support the child's understanding of their feelings, and then by giving words and improving their communication, they'll be able to tell us eventually, or communicate non-verbally.
Yeah, I understand that.
And can I just to add something, because Zuzana, what you're saying is so important, but can seem so like complex and difficult to do, especially because I don't know about all of you. I'm still working on learning how to appropriately express and manage my emotions. This is like a lifelong task for all of us as adults, and our children have particular challenges in this area. So one of the things that I think has made it can make it easier is to think about two things. One is that in situations where you can tell that your child is enjoying something or excited about something, it really can help to tell them that you see that. Ah, you really like your sandwich right now. Ah, you're really excited because your favorite cartoon is on, right? So you're actually reflecting back to them, as Zuzana is saying, also positive emotions. You enjoy something, you're excited about something, because oftentimes our kids are just, they're registering, they're starting to register a feeling, but they don't yet have the words for it. So when you give them the words and you say, I see that you're feeling this way by saying, you are really enjoying your sandwich right now, you're actually giving them some beginning and early words for emotions. And I would also say it really helps to practice doing the same thing yourself. So when I'm eating, yum, this broccoli is delicious. Oh, I really love this broccoli. I'm actually, how can I say, I'm amplifying all of the social emotional information about myself. And our kids oftentimes aren't able to pick that up and register it as easily. So even doing that for myself, when something happens or I taste something, I don't like that. It doesn't taste good. I'm actually giving my child information about my own emotions, and that can really help begin this process that Zuzana's talking about, that actually takes quite a long time to learn. This is not going to happen instantly, but it's important to remember that our kids on the spectrum can learn more about their emotions and their experiences over time if we give them that sort of extra special support that we're talking about.
And we are coming short to our time. There's another question that was entered into the chat about assistive talking devices and what our thoughts were about that.
I'll give you a ring tomorrow night. I can go back to my conference now in America. A video conference.
Can you mute your speaker for the last couple of minutes? I'm sorry. We didn't remind you guys to just mute your speakers when you're not talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So there was a question about our thoughts on assistive talking devices. And I don't know about you, Zuzana and Andrew, but I thought maybe this was a good time to direct that into our next webinar for when we speak about strengthening communication and language development, and maybe touching upon assistive talking devices when we do that PowerPoint and that presentation.
Yeah, I agree with that one. You know, if you want to, you know that you've given us the overview on communication and everything, but what happens if you want to actually learn more about it?
What do you mean necessarily about learn more about it?
Well, you've given us the overview with all the PowerPoints and everything, but if you want to take it further, how would I do that?
Excellent question. And what I would say, at least from, and you both of you, please step in if you have more understanding of this than I do in terms of the Transforming Autism project and what we're doing and what we're offering. I think what you're saying is recognized by all of us, that just giving you some information in this way through a PowerPoint can be a helpful starting point, but all of you as families need so much more guidance and support and feedback about how to actually use this in your everyday lives. So I know that the vision for this organization is to be able to provide a lot more of that practical kind of hands-on follow-up support for families. I don't think we're there yet, at least in terms of what we can offer through the Transforming Autism project. And so I know that our founder and director, his vision and his life's work is to make sure that we as an organization can provide more concrete support to you as a community, other than just what's available out there through your school district and your whatever therapy organizations you have
Doctors.
to be able to use. Yeah. So does that capture? I mean, is that accurate, Susanna and Kendall?
Yeah, and I would
Yeah.
also say, Andrew, it's different everywhere you live. And right now, I mean, my previous experience is in America, so I know how it works there. And now I'm in the Netherlands, and the process might be different than how it works in the UK. So I think, Susanna, you might also have more experience on what to do next.
Well, can I jump in? I don't usually, forgive me, I usually try to stay very quiet in the background on these, but because this question has come up, and Andrew was touching on, you know, what the next steps are for the charity. As you might know, we're a brand new charity. We don't have any face-to-face services yet, but we're putting them in place at the moment. And what we're trying to do over the next few months is really go flat out to raise the money to launch our first set of services. And they will be groups for parents around London, where we take the sorts of things that you're learning in the webinars, but we learn together as a group. You know, you have the same parents coming back every week, implementing ideas at home, coming back, feeding back to the therapist and the rest of the parents on how it went, and learning from each other, and really using the opportunity to build that strong relationship with the child, which is so important and where there's so little guidance and support at the moment. And also we're going to select a small number of families initially to have visits from one of our therapists. At the moment, that would be Zuzana, because she's the London-based therapist. And so that will be working with the parent and child together, again, with a view to helping the parent understand that what these signals that the three therapists today were talking about, that the children are giving off all the time, and these little signs, and really how they can build that strong relationship by understanding that and responding in a way that their child is going to make sense of it and feel nourished by. So really the whole purpose of these services is going to be about exactly, I think, what you said, Victoria, taking it to the next level in a very practical way based on each family. We are very much dependent on money, and we have a lot of money that we need to raise as yet before we can get to launching those services. Our target is to launch them in April, but it very much depends on how much we can raise in the meantime. Now I'm going quiet again.
Yeah, but
thank you so much, Guy.
That doesn't help me because I'm actually in Bristol.
Sure, and I wish we could spread the net really widely, really quickly, but we need to do this on a pilot basis in one place first. Otherwise, it won't be manageable for us. And I'm really sorry. And, you know, one of the things you can explore and look at is doing something remotely, but it's going to take time to put that together and in turn to raise the money for that. And I know that doesn't help you because you've got the need at the moment, but it's very much on our radar to solve this as soon as possible.
Right. Because there are other things like how this I mean, okay, this is nothing to do with the communication, but how do you actually help the child through transition? There's things like that the things that I need, but we can't get down here. They might be in sort of London and things like that.
I'll leave that to the therapists to answer.
No, I think, you know, Victoria, your questions are I'm sure are shared with many of the parents that are in this webinar. And so again, we recognize that we're just giving you guys a little bit of information and a few ideas or strategies to try out. And then the challenge is how as an organization can we then create some follow-up support opportunities. And it sounds like also, I don't know the UK at all, but it sounds like in Bristol where you are, you're maybe don't have as much available in your local community.
No, I don't. This is where the problem is. If I want to do, say, a course on say behaviour, this is just one example. I have to go to Birmingham or London or somewhere like that, you see.
Right. Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying, and I've used you lot as a starting point for say the webinars, but then if I want to take it further, I can't.
Yes.
Because
and I think unfortunately that's just where we're at right now, and I don't mean we as in the Transforming Autism project, but autism in general. And the script is moving, and we are making a lot of progress, and we're spreading the word, and we're trying to get services equal everywhere in the world, because that is so important.
yeah,
But I do acknowledge, and I absolutely recognize everything you're saying, because I feel the exact same way out here in the Netherlands, and my goal is to connect with Guy and with Andrew and Zuzana to try and help people in smaller cities who don't have that support yet. And I think we're getting there.
Yeah, it's going to take time, because I do the same sort of thing, but I go around to universities and places like that to actually help them, because let's say take a psychologist, for instance. When they leave university, they might have only had one bit on autism, and I go around and help them, but I want to bring up my own knowledge as well, so I can help other people, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. No. And I think that's what us as therapists are doing here, trying to give our knowledge. And if that knowledge then you can take and spread, that is just the cycle moving in the right direction. I think Victoria, you're on the right path, and I think it's wonderful what you're trying to do.
I think webinars are a very good way of being able to access those remote locations. You know, the world is no longer remote. We're not. You know, we
Absolutely.
are. We can be a community. You know, you can access from wherever you are. If we can get this as a training resource, you know,
right.
That's what's lacking. Yeah.
What a good point you make, Jules. Did you have any questions to ask for us?
I'm not specific, but you know, I know I think we've been answering them within the conversations anyway, to be honest. But
and on top of what you just said, there are questions that were submitted prior, and I think a lot of them were covered as well through the presentation and through everything that we've been speaking about in conversation. Does anybody else still attending have any other questions they want to ask?
No.
Can I just say one thing? There was one question that I'd like to reflect upon, and it's
yes.
How can I help my child speak in sentences rather than single words?
Yeah.
If the child communicates in single words, it's brilliant. And what I would look into is how to support just tiny step forward, one word at a time. So if there is, let's say, child can say car, I can say big car. So I add one more word to that rather than teach the child to say the whole sentence. And be very slow and follow the child's motivation, because where the motivation is, then the child is likely to stick another word to it. That's how I see it. I don't know if Kendall or Andrew have anything else to say to that.
Yeah, my first thought when I read this question was, is full sentences really that important, and is it necessary? If they're already communicating using single word requests, you can build on that, and eventually you might want the goal to be full sentences, but there's no need to pressure it or to force it upon the child. And like you said, Zuzana, really just engaging with them, adding in statements of an extra word here and there so that they can see you do it, you imitate them, they imitate you. I think it's beautiful progress.
There is also one thing we can consider. It's learning vertically, like this, and learning horizontally.
Yes.
So we can help the child using more single words. So it's not 5, it's 10, it's 15. So we'll expand at this level, and then we can grow 2-word sentences. 2 words is a sentence, isn't it?
Yes,
So just having
absolutely.
one two-word expression is a sentence. Bingo, great. You know, so I would just celebrate single words and expanding the. But still, the nonverbal is so important. So I wouldn't hang too much on the words. But I understand your motivation or desire is to support the sentences. I would celebrate if you reach two words, that's brilliant. You know, and just continue supporting both ways and celebrating both ways.
Andrew, did you have anything you want to put in before we get to a close?
Definitely. So very important question, and both of you, very important information about expanding language. And a word of caution about sentences, or sometimes understandably pushing for more language or full sentences, because it seems like if you're able to talk with more words or in full sentences, you're going to be more socially successful. And what I would say is this: what I've seen and what I've learned over the years is there's a lot of kids on the spectrum who actually have a lot of language, who seem to be able to learn language and speak in full sentences really quickly, but their ability to use that language socially in back and forth interactions is actually very challenged. So what we have to remember is we want the words to be really meaningful and functional for your child. So if a child is able to tell you in single words or even in 2 words what they're thinking about, what they most want to need, what they're most excited about, that child's actually going to be more successful socially than a child who speaks in full sentences because they've memorized lots of sentences, but they're not even sure sometimes what all of the words mean. And so we know that kids with autism can get really good at memorizing full sentences without having any idea what all of the words in the sentence mean. So I'm cautioning you about this because I've worked in a lot of programs that really push for longer strips of language that kids memorize, but then they're actually not even understanding what they're saying, or they're not using those words socially. So be really careful about that. And I completely understand the motivation, and it seems like the more words, the more sentences, the better. But that's not usually the case when we're talking about autism. So again, communication over specific words and language, and really help your child feel successful as a communicator. When kids feel like they're successful communicators, learning more language actually becomes much easier. Okay, so try as much as you can to trust in that right now. There we go.
There is one bit of a difficulty. If your children can't speak the language, right, and they use pictures like the picture exchange and all of those strategies to help them to communicate, how do you actually help them to actually convert that into language?
Excellent question, which I know we're going to spend the entire next webinar on, right? Yeah. Victoria, I feel like you're always like you're one step ahead of us.
Oh, sorry.
Multiple steps ahead of us. But that's an excellent question. And PECs and different kinds of visual communication systems can be very wonderful tools. At the same time, they can also have their limitations in terms of facilitating more natural back and forth communication. But then
how do you take it one step further, or is that going to be in the next webinar?
Yes.
Wonderful question.
Excellent question.
Rich.
And I
that'll be the next. That'll be next month then.
Yes, November 13th.
Right.
But I just wanted to add a quick thing also. If people are communicating with devices or PECs, to me, and Zuzana and Andrew, feel free to pitch in, but to me, that's already communication. And if that's how they're going to communicate, and if they can communicate effectively that way, the way I see it is that's them communicating in a way that's good for them. And that's just my little bit to add, but I have so much more, and we all have so much more to share with you in the next webinar on November 13th.
at 6 o'clock?
Yes, the same
Yes.
time.
Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's
Thank you. Yes, and thank you everybody, and thank you for your questions. And feel free to register for the next one, put in your questions, and Andrew, Susanna, and I all look forward to talking with you guys again.